My name is Sandile Malinga. I'm the Group Executive for Smart Society within the CSIR. And I will be chairing this session this afternoon, a science diplomacy session with the primary theme and role for it this afternoon being the role of science diplomacy in supporting a capable state. And I have two panels that will be sharing today with us. And before we do that, though, we are going to have Mr. Joy to come and tell us about the SDCFA. But before we do that, I think it's important for us to understand, for me, as a few other people are coming in, let's allow them to settle down. All right. Science diplomacy, it's an important topic to discuss, and it affects everything that we do. And more so if one is to understand that we are living in a world with complex problems. And the problems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis really transcends geopolitical boundaries. It doesn't know any boundaries. Whether you're talking issues of water, and so we share our water with Lesotho. And on the continent, issues of water have been a point of contention in many areas. And so it's very important that as we discuss science, look for ways of collaborating across boundaries, across geographic regions as well. And we tend to understand science diplomacy in that context. But I think I want to go further with that and say it also, apart from the geopolitical issues that are related to it and the diplomacy that's required there, science diplomacy also, when you look at the problems that we're faced with, it has intergenerational issues. And so whether you're looking at Greta Thunberg and the issues that she sometimes raises, forget about the politics that goes with it and where you stand with some of the things that she raises. I think it's important for us to recognize that the things that we do today are things that are going to affect future generations. And the things that we're experiencing today are the things that our forefathers did. And so when we talk of diplomacy, in as much as we could talk about it with regards to the geopolitics, it has intergenerational diplomacy. How do we talk to the future? Can they tell us something about how we're doing things and how we should do things? And indeed, we need to have that intergenerational diplomacy as well. And the other thing, it also, here being at the CSIR, when you look at 4IR, it's blurred the classical boundaries of things, whether you're looking at the physical against the biological, the real against the virtual, and other facets of how we've known the world to be. And it also requires diplomacy across different areas of specialization. I can't say I'm a physicist, and so a biologist shouldn't come here now and tell me what I should do. And so it's very important that as we talk about diplomacy, we talk about it in the context of the geopolitics that we talk about it in the context of the geopolitics that's related to it. But we also have to talk about it in the context of the intergenerational diplomacy that needs to happen. And thirdly, the diplomacy that has to be there in the different sciences as we know them in the different areas. And so that's how I look at it. And so I trust that as we engage today, these are some of the things that we'll deal with, but I suppose probably our emphasis will be more on the geopolitics and the diplomacy that's required there, which is not a problem to do that. And so without wasting any time and having started late, I will hand over to Dan Tutoy to tell us and welcome us today, and also tell us more about the SDCFA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malinga, for that introduction. And I'm going to be extremely brief because we have a rich panel for very important discussions to take place. Just in the first instance, to congratulate and thank CSIR for including this very important topic on this program, as hopefully all of you in the room who are important stakeholders and important partners in South Africa's national science, technology and innovation enterprise would be aware. Our cabinet is on the cusp of approving South Africa's new decadal plan, our 10-year plan for science, technology and innovation. And today's event really speaks to three key objectives of what that decadal plan is about. It's in the first instance about how do we harness science, technology and innovation to make South Africa a more capable state, and what do we mean with a capable state? A state which responds more effectively, more decisively to contributing to increasing the quality of living of all South Africans. How do we enhance science for social justice, as we just discussed in a session which took place before? But secondly, the decadal plan is also firmly committed to international cooperation and science diplomacy. It's a cross-cutting key objective because we know that for science and innovation to prosper, to advance in South Africa, we need enhanced international cooperation. But perhaps thirdly, most importantly, and the decadal plan, as I've said, will be approved by our cabinet. So it's not a DSI plan. It's not a plan for the science community. It's not even a plan for government. It's a plan for all of South Africa. And it's a plan which is about partnerships. And that's what we really hope will happen here this afternoon, is that it will be fertile ground for the formation of new partnerships. Science diplomacy, Sandile described it very, very eloquently. It's become a bit of a buzzword, and we should sometimes be careful of buzzwords because we then use it without often reflecting what we mean. But at the heart, what are the key issues today on the international agenda? Whether it's pandemic disease, energy security, food security, rising geopolitical tensions, science is at the heart of any issue currently on the international agenda. So science is becoming an important integral part of international relations. But then secondly, as I've said, also for science to progress, we need international cooperation. No country, no matter how big or powerful they are, can work alone. Throughout history, science has always progressed when countries come together across borders, share experience, share expertise, share resources. We like to know, looking at Dr. Pandor's advisor, Minister Pandor always says science knows no borders. So science diplomacy is putting science knowing no borders into practice. But there's a third aspect of science diplomacy which we should never underestimate, and that is the values of science and how that informs international relations. Because science is about solidarity. Science is about inclusion. Science is about a commitment to multilateralism. Science is about knowing that we're stronger together and not seeking division. And we hope that also science can play that enabling role to bring countries together and in these troubled times reinforce that global solidarity. So we are very grateful, Dr. Malinga, for the inclusion of this session on this program, because the Science Diplomacy Capital for Africa platform, which the Department of Science and Innovation is supporting, hosted by the CSIR, is seeking to exactly achieve that. It's in the first instance why the phrase was coined. If you may know or not know that our capital city of Tshwane is home to Africa's largest diplomatic community. It's one of the biggest diplomatic communities in the world, but it's also the heartbeat of the South African science system, with organizations such as the CSIR, but not exclusively the CSIR, in this very precinct, National Research Foundation, the Innovation Hub, universities, etc. So we thought there was a unique opportunity to bring this diplomatic community and the South African science system together. But why do we want them to bring together? We want to bring them together to work together and to join forces to respond to these global challenges we speak about, captured under the Sustainable Development Goals. So I certainly very much look forward in anticipation to the discussion this afternoon, because it's putting into practice what we speak about. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. As I indicated, we have two sessions, and the first one we'll be looking at how to build bridges between nations and strengthen interactions using science and diplomacy. And I have three panelists who will be joining me on the stage, and I'll request that probably they present and then sit there. And the first one to go is Ms. Mampe Chaba, who is the Chief Director, Multilateral Cooperation and Africa in the Department of Science and Innovation. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malinga, and thank you to the CSIR for inviting me this afternoon. And thanks to my DDG, Mr. Dan Tutoy, for that brief overview. Before I start, and I will really fly through the presentation because of limited time, but I wanted to bring three concepts to you that relate to science and diplomacy. The first one, science for diplomacy. And then perhaps the phrase that goes best with this principle. Can science be used to broker peace? If you think about the Ukraine-Russia situation, can scientists in Russia, in Ukraine, through their scientific collaborations, bring about sense and bring about peace? So when you talk about science for diplomacy, perhaps that's the phrase to think about. The second concept is science in diplomacy. Perhaps an easy way to remember what this concept is about is to think about the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this is where scientific knowledge, facts, evidence, research is used to, again, bring about sense, to build diplomacy, to build diplomatic relations. So how can we form a common group of similar thinking partners, group together? If you think about the Africa group or the G77, when they apply scientific facts and knowledge, then they realize that they need to club together and negotiate scientific terms for the sake of diplomacy. Diplomacy in science, the best term perhaps here is Ubuntu. How can we use our good relations to build, to venture into diplomatic relations that did not exist before? So where DERCO perhaps had not ventured into, and we start MOUs between research agencies, CSIR and another CSIR, start an MOU and then build a relationship that then the rest of the country, trade and industry, small business and others follow into. So in my presentation, I will not necessarily go into these three concepts, but I will illustrate how, as multilateral cooperation in Africa in DSI, we are building on the notion of science diplomacy. I will try to be quick. The presentation is slightly longer than I had wanted it to be. I'm sure you've all heard about the foreign policy mandate. The phrase at the end of that slide speaks about a better South Africa, in a better Africa, in a better world. So we don't see ourselves separate from the continent or from the world. But if we start building relations that help develop our own country, then we start strengthening regional cooperation. We start developing the continent and we become a better South Africa in a better Africa and a better world. So this is the DERCO's foreign policy mandate as far as 2012. This has been the overarching priorities that were set about by Cabinet. Consolidation of an African agenda. So we engage to support and develop Africa. Strengthening South-South cooperation. So those like us, developing countries, how do we cooperate together to build sustainable development? North-South partnerships and global systems of governance. So in the multilateral world, we really focus on systems of governance. In our case, it's science systems of governance. And we also focus on strengthening not just scientific relations, but political and economic relations as well. Dr. Malinga and Mr. Tutoy spoke about science not knowing any borders. If there is Ebola or climate change or drought, it does not care whether there's a border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. We are all affected. In addressing those kinds of challenges, we require scientists, we require research infrastructure, we require investments, we require sometimes even historical knowledge, historical trends to address those challenges. So we cannot afford not to cooperate. We need to work together. Chapter 9 of the decadal plan that Dan referred to focuses on internationalization. Department of Science and Innovation has made it clear in our decadal plan that this is a requirement to foster partnerships. We need to work across borders, across institutions in a multidisciplinary format so that we address all of those challenges. So we do that through the following strategic focus areas: transformative international research and collaboration engagements, inclusivity for impact, human resources and capacity building, international mobility, strengthening and growing research infrastructure capabilities, and enhancing Africa's capabilities. So we need to support Africa's capabilities. And then as we transition from science diplomacy into trade diplomacy, we need to draw the link between how science can contribute to economic development. And of course, we'd like to attract foreign direct investments in the process. We have a strategic framework for South Africa's STI diplomacy, which guides us on how to engage with countries in the continent. It's a two-pronged approach that focuses on development or pro-development and competitiveness. So there are countries in the continent that require more support, more assistance, more help to get to a level where we can have scientists engage, whether it's through STI policies, infrastructure, research fund organizations, etc. And these are mostly our LDCs, least developed countries. So our approach in engaging those is through a pro-development pillar. Pro-competitiveness, if you look at the likes of Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, we think we are on par with each other based on our strengthened science systems, economic activities as well, and economic indicators. So for those countries, we are not competing with each other, but we work together to become competitive as a bloc, as a region, as a continent. So that's the two pillars that we focus on in our STI diplomacy strategic framework. We have a number of outcome-oriented goals that we focus on here, as indicated there. I will not read through those, but most importantly, also, we want to support industrialization through science. We want to support RDI commercialization and intra-Africa trade. Strategic outputs are also listed there. I'm flying through this because I do realize we are out of time. And this is what we then intend to get if we work together as a continent to become competitive as a regional and continental bloc. That we want to see increased investments, improved research capability, ability to absorb technologies, to absorb new innovations, but to also improve service delivery, to reach the far-flung rural areas because of science, technology, and innovations. And then last but not least, to contribute to the economy. We have done an exercise to prioritize countries that we will engage with in the continent because we cannot engage with all 54 countries. And these are the 7 indicators that we had applied to do a prioritization. You'll see that we are led by DERCO. If DERCO says don't go here, we don't. We also look at a country's regional influence. So if it's a country's head of a multilateral body, or we think they have regional or continental influence, then there's a potentially mutually beneficial relationship that we can get into. But we also look at economic factors, how well a country invests in its science through the GERDP, gross expenditure on R&DP. Currently, also, we look at the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, because we want to trade using our high-tech products to develop the continent. We look at mutual areas of interest, our track record with those countries, capacity to be innovative, so looking at the entire innovation ecosystem and how they're funding the ecosystem, And lastly, we also look at policy enabling environment through innovation policies and how well they rank in the global competitiveness index. And then these are I think there should have been more. We have 26 STI agreements, formal STI agreements in the continent, and we will sign the 27th one in December with DRC. At the regional level, we are supported, and we also support the various regional strategies, the RISDP, Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, the SADC Industrialization Strategy, and others. So the regional STI industrial strategy focuses on those 3 pillars as listed there. And if you look at our engagements in the region, they focus on those 3 areas, supported by human capacity, infrastructure, and funding as well. At an AU level, we are led by the Agenda 2063 with its 7 aspirations. And if you look at all of those aspirations, especially the first one, we contribute to that through our STI engagements. That is, again, an more explicit definition or expansion on the STI strategy for Africa. So I would like to end there just because we're running out of time, but I will be happy to take any questions. Thanks.